Hey there, I hope you are doing well. In today's video, we are going to dive deep into the hospital industry in India and try to decipher why this particular segment of the healthcare industry is seeing increased investment interest from foreign institutional investors, and can this be a start of a new era of growth fueled by a massive Capex boom. At the end of this video, I'll also be sharing one stock where I have parked my money in. But keep in mind that the objective of this video is not at all to give you an investment recommendation, but instead to share with you important insights which could aid you in making informed investment decisions. In case you are new here, then hi, I'm Harshdeep Srivastav, a corporate finance graduate, an ex-investment banker, and now an entrepreneur. If you're really serious about building long-term sustainable wealth, then do consider subscribing to my channel. So without any further ado, let's get started. The Indian hospital market is expected to grow at a CAGR of 10.64% between 2025 and 2030. However, the larger private hospital chains are expected to grow at a higher CAGR of 12 to 14%, majorly because they have stable occupancy rates, better access to capital, and there is very limited healthcare spending by the government. The thing is, in India, the share of private healthcare is a lion's share of 70% when compared to 30% for government healthcare, and this gap is only going to widen going forward, which would obviously lead to more reliance on private players. In wake of this, the private hospital chains in India have accentuated their expansion plans by taking up both greenfield and brownfield projects. For those of you who don't know, greenfield projects are those projects when a completely new infrastructure or facility is built on a vacant piece of land, and brownfield projects are those projects when capacity additions, repurposing, or renovations are done to an existing facility. From my point of view, there is a clear indication that India's hospital industry is on a trajectory of growth that we have never seen before. There are literally so many factors that are shaping up an operating environment for private hospital chains that is conducive for them to expand vigorously. For instance, the rising life expectancy in India is leading to an increasing percentage of senior citizens in our population. According to India Aging Report 2023, which was published by United Nations Population Fund, nearly 1/5 of India's population will comprise people over the age of 60 years by 2050. At the same time, the rise in per capita income has led to the emergence of a growing middle class. These two factors make a compelling case because not only will there be an increased demand for modern, high-quality healthcare, but there will also be affordability for it because the middle class has better access to health insurance. In the report, Decoding India's Healthcare Landscape by Ernst & Young, they mention how the payer mix for India's population has changed over the years. From this, it is quite evident that there has been a decrease in the uncovered population. However, with 20 to 30% of the population still uncovered and 40 to 45% having inadequate cover under government schemes, there's still a lot of scope for Indian health insurance providers to increase their penetration, and that will eventually lead to increase in the hospitalization rates in India. Furthermore, the existing bed to population ratio in India is only 1.3 per thousand, whereas an ideal ratio should have been 3 per thousand. This deficit means there's a necessity for an additional 2.4 million beds to cater to the existing population. Since the hospital industry is highly capital intensive, it acts as a big barrier to entry, and so a large portion of this additional bed capacity required will be fulfilled by large hospital chains in the coming years. If one looks at hospital stocks from an investment perspective, then hospital chains that are expanding rapidly in metro cities as well as tier 2 and tier 3 cities are likely to witness tremendous revenue growth in the coming few years. One thing though that you must know is that a greenfield hospital generally needs 5 to 7 years of operation to start seeing stable occupancy rates, profitability, and finally become a mature hospital. Larger hospital chains might need a few years less because of already having a strong brand identity. This information is useful because if you see hospital chains opening up new hospitals in new geographic locations, then it is very likely that profits will follow in a few years, which will ultimately lead to increased EPS and share price. Look at this table from Anand Rathi Research, which showcases that India is one of the lowest cost treatment destinations when compared to global peers. Clearly, India offers cheaper complex surgeries and low travel and accommodation costs when compared to other developed nations, and that is probably the reason why India's medical tourism market is expected to grow from $7.69 billion in FY24 to $14.31 billion in FY29. The government's Heal in India initiative essentially aims to capture this opportunity and make India a global hub for medical and wellness tourism. All in all, with the government policies allowing 100% FDI under automatic route for greenfield projects, the hospital segment of the healthcare industry is ripe for a decade of unprecedented growth. And in my opinion, there's a good opportunity here to make 12% plus CAGR returns by investing in hospital chains that are undergoing huge capital expenditure to expand their operational footprint. So now that you are well acquainted with the landscape of the hospital industry, let's compare four of the largest hospital chains in India based on hospital industry specific parameters with the objective to find out which hospital chain in India is doing well financially and is also at the same time expanding its operational footprint consistently. The four hospital stocks that we'll be analyzing in today's video are Apollo Hospitals, Max Healthcare, Fortis Healthcare and Global Health, which is also popularly known as Medanta. Among these four hospital chains, Apollo Hospitals currently has the largest number of hospitals with an operational footprint in 28 cities. They have quite a good hold in metropolitan cities and are actively expanding their footprint in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities as well. While Max, Fortis and Medanta are not far behind, but still majority of their focus and revenue comes from metro cities. In terms of the number of operational beds, Apollo leads the race with 10,100 plus beds, followed by Max and Fortis, which almost have the same number of beds. However, if you only look at the total number of beds, you won't get a clear picture of their operations. It's important to look at the occupancy rate and the average revenue per occupied bed, also referred to as ARPOB. Looking at the numbers, it's evident that Max Healthcare has the highest occupancy rate and Medanta has the lowest. In ARPOB terms also, Max Healthcare leads the race with an average revenue per occupied bed of 78,000 rupees, followed by Medanta, Fortis and Apollo. Now from a superficial look, it looks as if investing in Max Healthcare is a no-brainer. However, there's a nuance here that these numbers do not portray well. The thing is, hospital chains like Apollo have a lot more new facilities in different cities, and since it takes 6 to 7 years for a hospital to become mature, these new facilities directly impact the occupancy rate as well as the average revenue per occupied bed. Moving on, another important parameter to compare hospitals is the ALOS or average length of stay. It's basically the average duration of a patient's stay in a hospital. Now, a layman who doesn't understand the hospital industry may assume that the higher the length of stay, which means the more number of days it takes for the patient to discharge, the better it is for the hospital. However, that is far from true. In the hospital industry, shorter hospital stays translates to shorter treatment durations, which means increased revenue for the hospital because more number of patients can be treated with the same number of beds. Hospital revenues in the recovery time post-treatment and before discharge tend to stay quite less, and so shorter ALOS is considered better for hospitals. From this table, it is quite clear that Medanta and Apollo have a lower ALOS of 3.2 and 3.3 days when compared to Fortis and Max's ALOS of 4.28 and 4.1 days. This indicates that Medanta and Apollo have better efficiency in bed management and enhanced patient outcome, that is quicker patient recovery and well-being. If you look at the revenue of these hospital chains, then you may observe that Apollo has 3 times the revenue of Max and Fortis, whereas the bed count is only nearly double. Well, it would make sense to you when I reveal the revenue segmentation. As you can see now, Apollo also runs an offline pharmacy chain which has a network of 6,626 outlets, which is why the revenue of it seemed skewed. Just so you know, Apollo reported in its annual report that their pharmacy revenue is growing at a CAGR of 20%. Likewise, Fortis also generates 17% of its revenue through its diagnostic business, Ageless Labs, which has a network of 420 centers currently. For Max and Medanta, majority of their revenue comes from hospital healthcare services only. If we look at the net profit of these hospital chains, then Apollo has the highest absolute net profit, followed by Max, Fortis and Medanta. While the CAGR growth in net profitability may be the highest for Medanta, it's majorly because most of its hospitals are mature. Apollo hospitals may seem to have the lowest net profit CAGR, but it's because they are aggressively expanding their operational footprint in new cities, and their new facilities will take few years to become mature. Now obviously, since a hospital's revenue is correlated to the number of beds they operate, it would be of great value to know what is the future planning of these hospital chains in respect to bed additions. Clearly, Apollo and Max Healthcare have really ambitious targets of adding 4,300 and 3,000 beds respectively. Also, take a look at the capital expenditure in value terms that these hospital chains aim to do for the increased bed counts. By looking at these numbers, you can make out that the hospital chains are quite optimistic of the healthcare demand in the future, which is why they are planning for huge capacity additions in the coming few years. This is not an investment recommendation, but I believe that this is the right time to invest in the hospital industry because 4 to 5 years down the line, these capacity additions will be EPS accretive and one would start to see higher returns as the number of mature hospitals rise. I personally feel that among the 4 hospital chains that we have discussed, Apollo Hospitals and Max Healthcare are doing a phenomenal job. But since Max is already trading at a really high P of 105, I've invested a small chunk of my portfolio into Apollo Hospitals enterprise. Now, I don't want to showcase a rosy picture of this industry, and so there is one concern that bothers me about this industry. In February of 2024, the Supreme Court had ordered the Department of Health to set hospital rates in response to public interest seeking standardization of rates. If it were the Department of Health that sets the hospital rates, then significant impact can be seen on the revenue and operational viability of private hospital chains. I hope you now have a better understanding of which parameters to focus on when investing in hospital stocks. Do consult with your financial advisor before making any investment decision. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for my next video.